There's all sorts of things that lead us to getting stuck. For instance, I can remember when I was in high school working ahead on math problems. I was always told if you can't figure out this problem, just move on to the next one and come back. Anybody hear that before? Now, I'm going to admit to something, and I don't want you to tell my wife, okay? I'm stubborn. Okay, so I want to figure out the answer to that problem. So I would just spend time and time and time just trying to figure out that problem instead of just moving on. So I'd just focus. I'd get stuck. Maybe you've been stuck before. Maybe it's been on a homework problem. Maybe you've been stuck in maybe a project at work. You didn't know what the answer was. You didn't know how to get out of that. Maybe you've been stuck in a rut. Maybe it's a habit that you have and you've been trying to break that, but you're just kind of stuck. Maybe it's a financial rut. And you're just trying to figure out, how in the world am I ever going to get out of this? How am I going to make ends meet? Is there ever going to be more money at the end of the month than there are bills to pay? Now, I remember getting stuck one time in Minnesota, where we spent 9 years. We had to, at times, clean off our roof. So we had this dormer that was put on after the house was made, and it was a fairly shallow pitch on that dormer. And so the snow would just kind of accumulate there, and if we didn't do something about it, it would create an ice dam in the gutter, and then the water, when it would melt, would back up underneath the shingles, and then it would condensate inside of the roof, or the ceiling, and drip. So we didn't want that. So we'd go out and clean it off. I didn't realize this. Everybody know what a rake is? You go out, leaves, and in Minnesota, they have this thing called a roof rake. Have you heard of that? Some of you maybe. And so I'm like, I grew up in Missouri. What do you mean you rake your roof? This doesn't make sense. So you got this long pole with a blade across it, and you scrape the snow down off of the edges. Well, you couldn't reach the dormer with the roof rake. But if you climbed out the upstairs window onto the garage, which was also kind of a slight pitch, you could climb outside and up the roof alongside of that dormer. You could actually just crawl up there. So you didn't have to get a ladder going up to the second story. You'd go out the window, climb up the roof, and you'd be on top of the dormer. So I went up there on a nice day. The snow had been accumulating, and so I had the shovel, and I was just pushing snow off. Well, when I was pushing the snow off, some of that snow had gotten onto that little piece of the roof that I had just climbed up. Now, this was light, fluffy snow, very slippery. And so I was like, stink. How am I going to get down? Of course, it was the one time I didn't have my cell phone in my pocket. And I'm stuck on top of the roof. Thinking, how am I going to get anybody's attention? Everybody's inside where it's warm because they're smart. I'm up here on the roof, stuck. And so I take my shovel, because that's the one tool I've got, and I lean over the edge of the roof at the peak, and I tap on the window to kind of knock so that my wife would know that, hey, I need your help. She didn't hear it. She didn't catch that at all. But what happened in the process was that the pane of glass that I lifted up, when I banged on the window, it fell down. Okay, so I'm sitting up here still just trying to figure things out. How am I going to get off of this place? It just so happened that the Swans man was coming that day. So I'm like, hey buddy, can you tell my wife that I'm stuck on the roof? And so she came up. She's thinking the window's open because obviously I crawled out it. Bam, head right through the window. Yeah. You can look at her nose. She probably knows you're going to check this out because I told her we were going to share this story. She's got a cut along the side of her nose from going through that window. So she is now bleeding like crazy, trying to figure out how she's going to stop that bleeding herself. I can't help her because she's stuck downstairs bleeding, and I'm stuck on the roof going, okay, that obviously didn't work so well. So I'm trying to figure out how we're going to make this happen. She eventually gets me a broom. I'm able to sweep it off, get down. I pick her up, take her to the emergency room so that she can get stitched up on her face. Now, maybe you've not gotten stuck quite that bad. Or maybe you have. Sometimes when we get stuck, it's really kind of insignificant and very humorous, especially after time passes. But other times we get stuck and it's not such a little thing, it's actually a much bigger deal and we don't really know how to get out of it, and the last thing we want to do is laugh because it hurts so much. And we're going to share with you a story throughout the series on the prodigal son. We've been looking at testimonies of different people. This is Melissa. And Melissa wants to share her story and how she was stuck. Take a look at this.
My journey started when I was 2 years old, and my mom and my dad divorced. And we had lived with my grandmother for a long time, and my grandmother and I did not have a good relationship. I met my ex-husband when I was a junior, met at a bar. I didn't really know who I was, though, at 16, 17 years old, to be in love or even know what it meant. It was just something was missing, but I just was so in the moment and wanted to get married and the whole fairy tale that I kind of pushed those feelings aside. Once we had my daughter, it definitely took a turn for the worse. His behavior changed and my behavior changed. And then once I found out I was pregnant with my son, I felt like I was just stuck. I have 2 kids and I definitely don't want to be a single mom with 2 kids. So I knew something had to change, and I just kind of went the wrong way to make that change. I had an affair, and then on Father's Day weekend, I had another affair. I think from the beginning of being with a grandmother that treated me like a piece of crap to now being in a relationship that I'm just destroyed and slept with multiple men, but there was no God. And if he was there, he was not a nice person. So, I would pray, but I didn't know who I was praying to. I just someone's there, so hear me, and you probably hate me, and why would you let this happen? The last affair I had turned into a relationship. It lasted 3 years, and it was a living hell. I was emotionally and physically abused, and my son was physically abused. Scissors being thrown, TVs being thrown, me locked in a room with a gun to my head, and they were just on the other side screaming. And during that time, I became a drug addict. I was on coke, and I drank a lot, and it lasted 3 years because I didn't know how to get out of it. So the only way I was able to get out of it was I moved. So I moved and didn't know where I was. Before I moved, I met my now husband. The first day I met him, we literally an hour after I met him, we ate at a TGI Fridays. We told each other stuff, and there was no judging because we both were there. We both had similar stories. It was scary. So I sobered myself up. Still had no God, but just knew I needed to do something because I was probably going to lose my kids. So we decided to get married, and before we did, we found the church. Everyone was amazing with our kids and where they should go, and it was life-changing. It is life-changing. It was amazing. Once the first service that we went to, we knew we needed to get baptized before we got married, that we needed to wash all the sins that we have committed in our previous marriages before me and him committed to each other. For years, many years, my husband and I both tried to do it on our own, and that wasn't working. So now we have a place that we could turn to when we need it. It's a relief. It's definitely a relief in any part of our relationship. If we have a troublesome moment, we turn to God, we pray. We're not going to drugs and alcohol and affairs. We're going to God. So that is a relief to have that. In our small group, people who message me daily, what can we pray for you about? It's an awesome feeling. It's a place that I am comforted and loved unconditionally, no matter what. It's what a home should feel like, and it does.
Well, we've been doing this series called Finding Your Way Back to God. We're on week number 3. The last couple weeks we've talked about some of the awakenings that happen on a journey back to God. And there's 5 of these awakenings. The first one was awakening to longing. That's where you know that there just has to be something more. You've hit the dead end. You're still searching. You're still empty. There just has to be someone who actually loves me, who cares for me the way I am. There has to be a purpose. What am I here for? What's my role in life? There has to be meaning. There has to be someone to answer this question, why? Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why am I going through the motions? And we all have these longings, and those longings leave us empty. They can leave us lonely, and they can leave us afraid. And so we strive to meet those longings. We strive to meet those needs. And so if we have this longing to love, we maybe will pursue bad relationships for the hope of feeling whole, for feeling like somebody actually cares about me. And you can see that was obviously Melissa's case. She was pursuing these relationships, hoping that maybe one of them would feel that need, that would make her feel special. And sometimes we have that longing for purpose, and so we can just dump ourselves into our career, into trying to make more money, into trying to be popular. Whatever the case might be, we can do all of this stuff, and we try to fill this hole ourselves, which leads us to the second awakening, which is an awakening to regret. We try to fill these God-given longings in our life by ourselves with all of this extra stuff. What we end up doing is looking backwards at yet another dead end going, wow, how did I end up here? And I can't believe all the damage that I've caused back there. How will anybody ever love me? How will I ever be appreciated? Am I ever going to be welcome anywhere? Who wants me? Now, we can stop right there, and we can get stuck in what we call the sorry cycle of longing and regret. We long, we try to fill it, we end up with regret. That didn't work. We try something else because we're still longing, and we still get regret. And we can try to do this over and over again, and we can get that pain cycle going over and over again. And Satan would love nothing more than to get us stuck there. Because when we're stuck in this cycle, he doesn't have to worry about us making progress, being in that rut. And he can work on our mind, and he can make us think things that aren't true, that nobody cares, that we're worthless, that we're never going to beat this. And he's just going to kick us and abuse us while we're down. Now that could be a tough place to be. Now maybe for you, that sorry cycle is not stuck on spin because you're going to a relationship after relationship. But maybe it's going from drink to drink, at bar to bar. And maybe that is from going from buffet to buffet. Trying to feel those longings with food, with cravings that are inside of us. Maybe it's going from one scratch-off game or lottery ticket to the next. One slot machine to the next. Because we're thinking, if I can just hit it big, then my problems will go away. And then we get stuck with this question. A question that I hope is burning in the back of your mind, and it's, how's that working for you? Like, have you eaten enough food to make that feel better? Have you made enough money to make that feel better? Have you pursued enough relationships that's filling that void inside of you? Or are you still left with regret? Are you still stuck in this never-ending spin cycle? And how do you get out of that? When we talk about these awakenings, it's important that we understand this third awakening, and it's the awakening to help. We're going to get to that in just a moment, but help is one of those things that we need to break the cycle, because we've tried to do it ourselves. We've tried to find the solutions. We've tried to fabricate something on our own. We've tried to dream it up. We've tried to work our hardest. We've tried to succeed. We've tried to make everybody else think we've all got it put together. We've got our church clothes on, our smiles on our face, and when somebody says, "How we doing?" we're great. But we know the reality. We know the pain inside. We know the hurt that we're feeling. We know that we have this need to be wanted and accepted and appreciated and loved. And we need to understand that throughout this year of ministry and beyond at Connection Christian Church, many people have found their way back to God. Some for the very first time. And they're beginning to break this spin cycle, and they're beginning to get back on their feet again because they're searching for help. They're searching for something more, something that's more lasting. And there are others of us that we realize that the longer I've been on this journey, the more times I have to find my way back to God. Because I get stuck, and I get sidetracked, and I get distracted, and life catches up, and busyness happens, and families have struggles, and work is work. And it can be tough and draining. But we need to understand, kind of like AA, you don't just go through the 12 steps one time, and boom, you're saved, you're healed, you're no longer an addict. You go through them time and time again so that you can stay sober. And so we go through these awakenings time and time again so that we can stay in a relationship with God, so that we can stay connected. So when we feel the pain, when we feel the hurt, hopefully we're learning that longing I can't fill on my own, and so I immediately need to skip that step, and I need to go right to asking for help. But help is never an easy thing to do. I hate asking for help. It's a struggle. I think it's a pride issue, if we're going to be honest. Like, I can do this myself. I got this. Right? Or, I don't want to inconvenience somebody else. Nobody else, maybe it's a privacy issue. Nobody else needs to know my stuff. Nobody else needs to know what I'm going through. And then we lock ourselves away in our own little closet. Nobody knows that we're hurting. Nobody knows that we're struggling. And there's nobody that's going to help because we don't know what you're going through. And maybe that's you, or maybe that's just me that likes to hide things away and think, I'll fix this myself. When I get this fixed, then I'll plug in, then I'll get involved, then I'll be a Christian, then I'll go to church, then I'll be an active part of the family. But first, let me get this fixed in myself. Again, how's that working? Is that causing more problems? Is that causing more issues? Are you ready to ask for help? As we've been going through this prodigal son story in Luke chapter 15, if you want to follow along, page 568 in the Bibles we provide, Luke chapter 15. We see in verse 17 through 19, and we hit this last week, the son had kind of this revelation going on in his mind. You see, he had left home, he had taken his inheritance, he told his dad he was as good as dead, and he went off and he squandered it. And when he got to the point where everything was empty and he was feeding hogs and he wanted to eat that food, and he realized, it says in verse 17, but when he came to himself, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? See, there's a famine in the land and there's no food to be found. And he is realizing, man, I should have maybe stayed home. Like Dad's workers. Dad's workers have more than I have. So that's an important step to finding your way back home. And in verse 18, the motivation to action. This is huge. Sometimes we have this light bulb moment, something goes off and we do nothing about it. I'll get these ideas, these great ideas, and I won't write them down. I'll think, I'll remember that. Then I come back to it and go, what was that again? What was I going to do with that? Sometimes you'll come to church or to a Bible study and you'll hear something and it'll be like, oh yeah, that was good. And then you walk out and life happens and that thing is gone. The action that needs to accompany the information isn't there. And it's the information with the application. Guys, we try to do this all the time at Connection. We want to make sure that we present the Bible in a way that you can understand it. We give you the information and the application so that when you apply it in your life, it can lead to transformation. It can change the way that things have been. Sometimes change is hard. It's difficult. We don't want to go there. We don't want to do that. But the reality is, when we hit that dead end, when we hit the place of longing, wishing for something more, but we're in a dead end that has left us with regret, we need to know that ultimately change needs to take place. And so here it is. I will arise and go to my father. He's already got a plan of action even, because this isn't going to be easy. And I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I will no longer be worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Okay, so he's got a plan. He's got this all played out in his head, but there's a really important question that I think we're not asking ourselves. Like, what is taking this guy so long? How long would you have to feed the pigs before you realized, I need to just go back home? I mean, is it a pride thing? Does he just sit there thinking, man, I can't. I mean, I blew it. I made a huge mistake. I asked for my money. I threw it all away. I can't go back. It's too humiliating. What is it for this guy? One of the things we miss in our modern day interpretation through our lifestyle is this thing called Kezazah. Kezazah is a tradition for the Jewish people at this point in time. So kind of the way that this works out is that a Jewish family, if their son requested their inheritance and he went off and he squandered it amongst the Gentiles, that'd be the non-Jewish people, God's chosen people, and they would try to come back into the Jewish community, they would meet them at the front gate. So like somebody in the community would see them far off before they arrived. They would go and grab a pot, and they would go and meet this guy at the front gate. They would hold out the pot and shatter it. They would say, you are broken off. You are cut off from this community. You are no longer welcome. You do not belong here. You have caused too much damage to your family, to your friends, to this community. You are dead to us. How's that for a welcome home party? Why do you suppose he was so eager to go home? I think we all face this fear of rejection, don't we? We want to be appreciated. We want to be loved. Even though we know that we've done wrong, we've made mistakes, we want to know that somebody actually cares enough that they're going to be there for us. And so this young man is left with this dilemma. And so as he's come up with this plan in his own head, Dad, I'm not expecting to be your son again. I'm just going to be your hired slave. Just take me in. I'll stay with your servants. I'll eat what they eat, do what they do. He's coming up with a plan of action on how he's going to deal with Kezazah. What do you suppose Dad's going through? I'm willing to bet Dad's friends were probably all gathered around going, hey, it's going to be okay. I mean, one day your son is going to come home and he's going to admit everything that he's done wrong, and you're going to just welcome him back in, and it's going to be like nothing has ever happened. I'm guessing his friends were a lot like our friends. Boy, if that was my son, I'd tell you what's coming his way. We're all pretty tough when the situation doesn't involve us. So I'm willing to bet that they're feeding into this father negativity, rage. But somewhere in this, the father, he's not hearing it. All that he can think about, all that he can hope for, all that he can long for is that one day his son's going to come back home. When is that going to be? Talked about it last week, like the father just sitting on the front porch, looking out over the horizon. The day's work has been done, and he's probably just dreaming, imagining, well, what if my son would just come home tonight? He's probably praying, crying his eyes out, God, if you just bring him home tonight. Then there's that one day, and he sees his son. We need to ask ourselves a question. Regardless of whatever you've been faced with, whatever thing that you've tried to stuff into that longing that's left you with regret, you may be worried about rejection. You may be worried about your own kezaza. But you need to try to figure out what kind of God is waiting for you. What kind of dad is waiting for you at home? Some of us know. I've been there. My stepdad, when I was in high school, if I messed up, the last person I wanted to see was this man. Because I knew he was going to rub it back in my face. I knew that there was going to be discipline to face, that it was going to be harsh. This was not going to be the kind of person that responded in love. And maybe that's the kind of father you've grown up with. And maybe that's the kind of reaction that you're expecting. God can't possibly love me. God knows what I've done. He knows where I've been. He knows who I've been with. So you're stuck. And you're allowing the pain and the regret to hold on to you. And you're allowing the fear to hold you captive. And you need to answer this question. Or better yet, why don't we look at the story and find the answer? What kind of God is waiting for you? Let's go back to Luke in chapter 15, picking it up in verse 20. And he arose, and he came to his father. But while he was still long off, his father saw him and felt compassion. Get this. And his father ran and embraced and kissed him. What kind of father did the prodigal have? The same kind of God that you have that's waiting for you. You have a God that will run and embrace and kiss you and say, "Welcome home." And that's the story that Jesus is trying to tell the people, and that's the story that Jesus is telling us today. You are always welcome home. But you need to ask for help. Who do we ask? Where do we go? Who's going to understand? I would suggest it's the author of the story, Jesus himself. The Son of God who gave up everything in this kingdom of heaven to step down and walk on this earth, to go through the same temptations and the same struggles that you've faced, who knew what you were up against, who knew you when you were at your worst, and yet He went to the cross and He willingly surrendered His life as a sacrifice, paying the punishment for your sin through the act of death. But the amazing thing is we get the story, we get the full story, and we see that the death couldn't hold Him, the grave couldn't stop Him, that this Jesus, who humbled Himself and became nothing, was exalted above everyone and seated at the right-hand seat of the throne of God. And this same Jesus, it says in John chapter 14, verse 6, He's the way and the truth and the life. And no one comes to the Father but through Him. But guys, we need to ask Jesus to save us, to free us from regret, free us from fear, free us from suffering. Help us to break the spin cycle and get out of this rut. And to direct us to a place in the presence of God where we can find a true healing for the longings that are taking place in our life. You know, there's another story that's out there, and maybe you saw it. It's an Olympian a while back. He was running the race, and he had prepped big time for what was taking place in this race. And Derek Redmond had faced a number of injuries, and even one just months before getting to this Olympic medal. Take a look at his story and what's taking place.
my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. Stormy seas, I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Did you catch Derek's dad? Like, his dad wasn't content watching his son fail. He wasn't content watching his son hurt. He broke through the crowds, and no matter who was coming to separate him from his son, he wouldn't have anything to do with it. And when his son was struggling to make it to the finish line, it was his dad right beside him every step of the way, helping him to find his way home. Guys, we serve a God who doesn't just sit there, doesn't nag and doesn't complain, but He welcomes us. And He doesn't just welcome us when we make all the strides and get everything fixed. When we repent, when we turn from our past actions, and we return back home and we focus on, fix our eyes on Jesus, we have a God that gets up. And despite the humiliation, the indignity of it, for this guy having to raise up his uniform, so to speak, and expose his bare legs so that he could run to his son. A dad that he should have been worthy of respect. Everybody should have been running to him, moving to him. He shouldn't have to go to them. It was very undignified for a man in this culture to have to do this. But even more than that, I have to wonder if the dad didn't have a little inside information. Did he know about this thing called Kezazah? Did he know that the townspeople, his community, they would be going to meet his son at the gates? Did he know that he would be hearing them saying, "You have no part with us. You have broken us. You are empty. You are unworthy. You have been cut off"? I think his dad had a race of his own to win. And in a single act to prevent his son from suffering humiliation, rejection, he laid himself on the line. He took away the Kezazah, the cutting off of his son. And he welcomed him in with open arms. He gave him his signet ring. He put his best robe on him. He killed the fattened calf, and he had a party because he was excited to see his son coming home. Because I don't know what kind of journey you've been on. If you were here last week, what kind of rumspringa you've been dealing with. what you've been trying to fill this hole in your life with. But you need to understand something. There is help in the name of Jesus. And there is a God who loves you, who has a purpose for you, and is running, waiting to run to you with open arms. And the band is going to come up and they're going to sing this song. It's a David Crowder tune. Come as you are. Because you need to know that you can't fix this yourself. You can't bandage this up yourself. You can't earn your way to heaven. You can't be good enough to get your way to heaven. You can't even work out your own problems right now. I know that because I've been there, and at times I'm still there. But that help is in the arms of Jesus. And one thing Melissa mentioned in this video was that she realized when she got to church and people were so warm and welcoming and they just embraced her. As we are a church that embraces the broken, that loves the sinner, and encourages them to go on to so much more and to pursue their God-given purpose in life. But she realized there needed to be a marking point. There needed to be a line drawn in the sand, and she gave her life to Christ through baptism. And we do a baptism here at Connection Christian Church. It's a full immersion baptism where you say, I'm all in for Jesus. I want to die beneath the water, leave my sin there, and I want to arise to new life just the way that Jesus conquered the grave. And I want to walk in this new life. And you don't have to have it all together. You don't need to have it all figured out. You can't possibly fix it good enough to earn the grace of Jesus. But He wants to give it to you. Some of you, that call is there for the very first time. And for others, you're sitting there broken once again, struggling once again, stuck in a pattern of behavior all over again. And you've been baptized and you've given your life to Christ, but your eyes have wandered. You've been distracted. You've been overwhelmed. And now maybe for the 101st time, you're ready to say, I'm back in. I'm in the game. I need to focus. I need to get this game on. I'm all in for the cause of Christ, and you need to suit up. So as the song is being sung, we're going to do like this old-fashioned come to Jesus moment. And if you need to make this decision, the first time, the 101st time, come forward and let's talk.